here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Noah and the flood. And we're going to do that in about 25 minutes. And then I'm going to let you go for lunch if I can. So, these are the generations of Noah. That word generations is toledot. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we have here another literary marker indicating the end of one section and the beginning of another. So Genesis 6:9 marks the end of Genesis 5:1 to 6:8, which told us about the generations of Adam and what came from Adam. And Genesis 5:1 to 6:8 is a story of the old world before the flood. It begins with the creation of Adam and traces the multiplication of Adam's descendants up to God's announcement that he's going to destroy all living creatures. And so it links the creation and the flood by genealogy of 10 patriarchs in Adam's lineage. This explains why God has to destroy the old world. That's what comes in the next section. Genesis 6:9 also marks the beginning of a new section up to the end of chapter 9, which deals with what comes from Noah, his generations. It starts with Noah. Now, Noah, we're told, is righteous, and that refers to how he relates to men. He's righteous in his relationships. And he's also blameless, and that points to how he is with God. That word blameless is the same word that is used as referring to an animal without defect or unblemished that are to be presented as sacrifices in Leviticus. So he's not sinless, but he is complete. He walks with God like Enoch, and he has 3 named sons like Adam and Terah, who are the 2 other fathers at the beginning of periods of new creation by God. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way in the earth. And God said to Noah, I've determined to make an end of all flesh, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I've determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Did I read one line twice or something? All right, let me do it again. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I've determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So one of the things I want you to understand is that in these few verses, there are 3 different forms of the verb corrupt that is used to describe what humanity had done to itself and the world in Noah's day. The word is sakat, which means corrupt or to bring to ruin or to destroy. Now, it's used here, but it's also used here, which the English translation translates as destroy. But that prevents us from seeing the point. So if we were to use a similar word for all the occurrences, it would read something like, now the earth was gone to ruin in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw it had gone to ruin, for all the people on earth had ruined their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence. Because of them, I'm surely going to ruin both them and the earth. What do you think is the point of God saying he's going to do what they had done and the state that it was in? What's the point? Let me help you.
Repeat the question.
All right. The text uses the same word at these 4 places. In the first place, we're told the earth was gone to ruin. Same thing as corrupted. Second place, God saw it had gone to ruin. Same thing as God saw it was corrupt. And then it says all people on earth, it had gone to ruin. Why? Because all the people on earth had ruined their ways. In other words, had corrupted their ways. And so God says, you know what? I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I'm surely going to destroy both them and the earth. Really, he's saying, I'm surely going to ruin both them and the earth. So God is using the same word here to describe what he is going to do that describes the state of the earth. And it is in this state because the people had ruined their ways. So the state of the earth is because of what people had done, and God says he's going to do that to them and the earth. Let me tell you. He's going to bring back on them what they did. Here's another way of putting it. They have destroyed it. They are on a trajectory of self-destruction. And so all God is doing is bringing to a head the path that they are on. Now that's important because when we read about the flood, many people say, boy, the God of the Bible is petulant and angry. He doesn't wash out the people then. But the biblical text is saying that God assesses it and it's ruined. They've spoiled it. And so what God does is, I got to wipe it out and start over. You know in Jeremiah 18, where it says that the potter takes a clay, and when the clay gets marred in his hand, he has to basically shape it all over again. That word marred is the same word as sahat. The point is that God is shaping the clay, we mess it up, and God has got to mash it up and then start all over again. By the way, this is our life. This is Romans 1:18. God gives them over. You keep going down a path, it gets to a place that God can't fix you. And he's got to say, all right, this is the path you've chosen. Here you are. And we said, no, I'm wicked. No. What does it say? They had ruined their ways. And because they had ruined their ways, the whole earth had gone to ruin. And God sees no longer good, but ruin. So it is a mercy for God now to bring the flood. Because if they keep going, he's sparing them waiting to get to that terrible place. It's time for a reset. The next thing is God says that there is violence on the earth. What does he mean by this violence? The Hebrew word is Hamas. That's the same word, yes, from the group in Palestine. That they're making their intentions clear. I bring no judgment. I'm just telling you what the word is. And Hamas usually refers to physical violence, but it can refer more broadly to a wrong committed against another, such as injurious language or harsh treatment. So, for example, when Sarah says to Abraham that may God judge between you and I, because I put my servant in your hands and now she's pregnant. You're responsible for the wrong I'm suffering. You're responsible for the Hamas I'm suffering. By the way, she's guilty of more violence against poor Hagar, but the irony is there. All right? Now, Gordon Wenham says, violence denotes any antisocial, unneighborly activity. Very often it involves the use of brute force, but it may just be the exploitation of the weak by the powerful, or the poor by the rich, or the naive by the clever. Hamas is cold-blooded and unscrupulous infringement of the personal rights of others, motivated by greed and hate, and often making use of physical violence and brutality. In this context, Genesis 4, which deals with Cain, well illustrates the meaning of violence, although the word itself is not used here. This is why God has got to bring the flood. Whilst I was in Turkey, I came across this statue of the Roman Emperor Hadrian in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum. And I think it powerfully depicts what Hamas is in Genesis 6. Notice that the emperor is larger than the person that he's got his foot on. The emperor embodies Rome and Rome's power. And the point is that he's bigger, Rome is bigger, more powerful, stronger, more glorious than his subjects. And because he is bigger and more powerful, he can exercise his authority by putting his foot on his subjects. The Romans made this about themselves, you know. They're glorifying their violence. And he's oppressing his subjects, Notice, the subject is downtrodden. With their face, they cannot even lift their face from off the ground because the power of Rome is so strong that it can completely oppress them and have its way with them. Humans made this. But we're happy because we know this is only in the past. And we know that the Romans were terrible and wicked. But in our generation, we do not exercise this type of horrific violence. This kind of behavior is what God is referring to when he says he's going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. This grieves God to his heart. It continues today in powerful countries that oppress others, in corporations which exploit others, with races and social classes which dominate others, in schools and churches and in homes where the weak are exploited, manipulated, oppressed, or treated unfairly or high-handedly by those who have power. And if we think about it, we have exercised this kind of violence. About 2 weeks ago, I got a call from someone who used to be in my ministry when I served on the staff of the Kingston Church more than 20 years ago. I get these interactions from time to time, and basically the person I spoke to expressed how when I was his ministry leader, the words he used were, I had too much authority in his life. And I won't get into the details of the conversation except to say that all I could do was apologize. I said, you're right. I should not have had that authority in your life. And then he started saying, well, you know, part of it is that we're part of a system that, and I said, yeah, we were part of a system, but I did not have the maturity or the spirituality to deal with you in a way that did not take advantage of that authority that I ought not to have had. And so as I was preparing this slide with my picture of the Emperor Hadrian, that conversation came right back to me. And I thought, yes, that's right. I've been the Emperor Hadrian. I think about in my own household, I try to be generally gracious, patient husband and parent. But there have been times in my household when I've been very heavy-handed. You know, the Bible says, husbands, do not be harsh with your wives. And it says, don't exasperate or embitter your children. I've done those things. And I'm sharing them because I'm hoping that you can do some self-reflection too. Because sometimes, we think, yes, man, no, them country, that's up north or wherever, far from them. And we see all the violence in others, but the point I'm making is, it's in us. There, but for the grace of God, goes I. And so, my point is that this is what is going on in the world. Why God says, you know what? I've got to hit the reset button. So he tells Noah, make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark is 300 cubits. Its breadth 50 cubits. Its height 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above. And set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. So God says he's going to save Noah from all of this. And he gives him dimensions to make an ark. That word for ark, the Hebrew is teva. It occurs only in the flood narrative, and the other place it occurs is where it describes the basket in which baby Moses is placed by his mother. And so it's probably an Egyptian loan word meaning box or chest that is used as a watertight vessel to preserve human life from impending disaster. So both Noah and Moses are saved from drowning by being placed in an ark. Now there's some discussion about the size of the ark. The first thing is the proportion of its dimensions are those of an ocean-going ship, which is different than the Gilgamesh epic in which the boat in which a flood survivor is saved is a perfect cube, or one version of another flood story, the Atrahasis epic, in which it's a rounded boat. And then there's another one where it is a ziggurat. I'll tell you what a ziggurat is, like a tower. So we said, great, this sounds like a boat that its dimensions look like something that can actually work. So it's 450 feet long, about 75 feet high, and 45 feet wide. It's about 1.5 times a American football field, or about the same, our football field or a soccer field. But whilst the proportions are correct, there really are no entirely wooden ships that have ever been built of this dimension. And there is some discussion as to whether this really reflects the dimensions of the ark. Some suggest that what we're dealing with is hyperbole for rhetorical effect. In other words, these are not the real dimensions of the ark, but what we have is reality being described using larger dimensions than normal to make a point for effect. So I showed you Hadrian, and we know he's not that much bigger than his subject. Similarly, we have here an Egyptian pharaoh, and he's riding over his subjects. And notice how big he is to the subjects. And so the idea is that in art, we're not trying to depict reality by exact correspondence, but we're using a difference within the artistic convention to communicate some truth about the reality. And so it's thought that with the flood account, we should not criticize the size of the boat as being unreal because of its dimensions. We're barking up the wrong tree there. We're trying to get it to conform to how we would convey this information in the 21st century, but what we're dealing with is an artistic convention. But there's a guy in Kentucky who actually built an ark of the size of the ark itself. Only problem is that they use steel constructs to hold together and power drills. Anyway, I am moving on. Yes. Can I keep going and we ask at the end? Thank you. For behold, I'll bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that's on the earth shall die. But I'll establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, your sons' wives with you. So here's God's grace. God saving Noah was not an afterthought. God thought that I am going to save you because through you, I am going to try to restore the earth. Well, Noah did what God says. He did all that God commanded. And then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and all your household, for seeing that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heaven, also male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I've made I will blot out from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. So Noah obeys God. God calls him righteous. He's a bit of a flat character. He does not really talk much to God. The only time he talks is when he pronounces a curse on Canaan. And I think this is because the emphasis in the flood story is on God as a hero. But also, the narrative is going to slow down when we get to Abraham, because it really is about the story of Abraham and how we fit into it. I want to make the point very quickly that the flood account is actually a chiasm, and that really is a fancy word to say that it is arranged in a pattern where it is inverted. Chi is the Greek letter, chi is the Greek letter C, which is shaped like an X. And so the way it works is that you start, this introduction matches the conclusion down here. We have violence in creation, that matches this speech where God speaks of the covenant. God speaks of a resolution to destroy, he resolves here to preserve order. There is a speech where he tells Noah to enter the ark, that corresponds to here afterwards where he tells him to leave. The flood begins, the earth dries. The flood rises, then it recedes. And this makes sense. You go in, and then you come out. But the reason why it's arranged this way, and let me tell you, there are 38 verses before God remembers Noah, and 38 verses after it. It is an intricately arranged pattern. And it's arranged this way to make this point. In the center of it, the pivot, the focus, is God remembers Noah. God is a God, and it doesn't mean that he forgot him. And they say, oh, I'm in the boat, it must smell bad. No, it has to do with relationship. God honors his covenant. What God says he was going to do, he's going to do. And remember, Noah's on this boat for a while. There's also a structure in which the periods relating to the flood create another chiasm. 7 days of waiting for the flood, 7 days wait to come out. And in the center of it, again, is God remembers Noah. And I think Noah wanted to be remembered after 150 days with the water over the earth. God remembers. God remembers you. The promises he made to us, no matter how it seems like, boy, somebody said earlier, I think it was Pat, that boy, is faith about waiting? Yes, it's about waiting, but it's waiting knowing that God remembers us. So what is God doing in the flood? Well, the world starts with non-order, right? And then God comes into the picture to create order. And then man, through sin, brings disorder. Well, God has got to return the world to non-order in order to bring order. So man's disorder has got to be wiped out by the flood. And that returns us to the non-order, the watery blob that the world was at the beginning. And then just like at the beginning, the wind of God, the Ruach Elohim, comes over the earth and produces order. And so the flood is a decreation. God creates, man messes up, so God has got to decreate with the flood, and then he recreates by reversing the flood. So in the beginning, God creates the firmament and he separates the waters above from the waters below because everything was just water. And then he gathers the waters below together, allowing the dry land to appear. That's how God creates order. Well, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. So all the water that is under the earth, remember this is their cosmology, water under the earth, all of that now is breaking forth. And the windows of the heaven, because you got the firmament, you got water above and windows in it, God opens that up. The whole thing implodes because God is washing it out and rain falls on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. God remembers Noah. God makes a wind blow over the earth. That reminds us of God's Ruach Elohim over the waters that produces all the order when God created the world. The waters subside, the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heaven are closed. So he's returning the order by shutting off the water above and the water below. He's separating them again. The rain from heavens are restrained. The water recedes. That means eventually the earth is going to appear. As it says, the ark comes to rest on the mountains of Ararat. That's like God separating the waters. Now, this is in your handout, and I went through this in some detail, I believe, in either the first or the second part of the series, so you can review it there. I don't have the time to go over, but basically what's happened is there's a correspondence between Genesis 1 and the flood account. So, watery blob, and God's breath hovers over the waters. God comes over the waters and the waters recede. He separates the waters above and below. He does it here as well in Genesis 8 to 9. He gathers the waters in one place. We have the waters return from the land. The tops of the mountains appear. And then vegetation, that's a dove with a fresh branch. And then you can keep going, you know. The dove leaves the sky, the ark to return to the sky and the land. The animals correspond to God's creation of living creatures. God rested and God blessed. The ark rested and God blessed. The point is that God does not rest because there's still more work now to do with his disordered creation due to the work of man. I won't go over this much either. There are correspondences between God's spirit, wind, and water and creation. I think I went through this last time. You can check that video and you can have a look at it as well. The ark comes to land on Mount Ararat. I shouldn't say that. The Bible says it comes to land on the mountains of Ararat. So not one specific mountain, but a mountain range. Mount Ararat is actually in Turkey, but there are parts of this range, Ararat, that goes into other parts of Armenia and Kurdistan. That's Mount Ararat in Turkey, but I don't think it's saying it landed on this specific mountain. It landed somewhere there. There are New Testament connections. The flood is a symbol of judgment and an image of Judgment Day in a number of places in the New Testament, but it's also a symbol of salvation. The same water that God used to destroy is the water that lifts the ark above the destruction and saves Noah and his family. And those of us who like baptism will remember that then the water symbolizes baptism.